My sister tried to ruin my baby shower by telling my husband that he's not the father, and now she's filing a paternity suit, claiming she's the baby's real mother. The baby shower was supposed to be a celebration, a moment to finally share the excitement of our baby girl with family and friends. But my sister Megan, 30F, had other plans. She'd always been dramatic, but lately her jealousy and mood swings had grown more intense, and I could feel her resentment simmering beneath the surface. Still, I never expected her to go this far. It was mid-afternoon, and I was in the middle of opening presents when I noticed my husband, James, 34M, walking back into the room with a blank, stunned expression. He looked as if he'd just seen a ghost. The sight of him immediately made my heart drop. I put the gift down and made my way over to him. "James, is everything okay?" I whispered, but he barely looked at me. I just spoke with Megan," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "She pulled me aside and she told me I'm not the father of this baby." It was as if the ground had been ripped out from under me. My heart was racing, my head spinning. "What? That's insane, James. How could she even say that?" He looked me straight in the eyes, pain and confusion evident on his face. She said she's the real mother." I felt like I was going to faint. The room spun as I tried to process his words. Megan, my own sister, was not only claiming that James wasn't the father, but that she was actually the baby's real mother. The accusations were too wild, too twisted to be real, but I could see the doubt flickering in his eyes, and it broke my heart. I didn't even have a chance to respond before Megan strolled back into the room, her expression composed, as if nothing had happened. She looked me up and down with a smirk, as if daring me to confront her. My fingers trembled, but I clenched my fists, refusing to let her see how shaken I was. Megan walked up to us, her tone dripping with false sweetness. "Oh, is something wrong, sis? You look a little pale. Big day getting to you." I took a deep breath, fighting to stay calm. "Megan, what did you tell James?" She raised an eyebrow, her face a mask of innocence. "Oh, I just told him the truth. He deserves to know that he's not actually going to be a father." She looked at my belly with a smug expression. "And that I'm the real mother of this baby." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was beyond anything I could have anticipated, beyond jealousy, beyond sibling rivalry. This was calculated malice. James stood frozen beside me, his eyes darting back and forth between us, clearly struggling to process it all. "Megan," he finally said, his voice tight with anger. "What are you talking about? You're not making any sense." Megan sighed, as if he were the one being unreasonable. "It's simple, James. I'm the biological mother of the child. She's been hiding it from you, hoping you'd never find out, but I couldn't keep this secret anymore." I took a step forward, my anger bubbling over. "Megan, that's ridiculous. I'm the one who's pregnant. This is my child, not yours. How could you even come up with something so twisted?" But she didn't flinch. If anything, her expression grew more smug. "Well, sis, if you're so certain, then why don't we settle it in court? I'll file for a paternity test to prove it." The whole room had gone silent, our friends and family watching in shock as Megan made her insane claims. The day that was supposed to be filled with joy, laughter, and celebration had suddenly become a nightmare. I looked around at everyone, at the shocked faces of friends, the worried looks of family members, and then back to Megan, who seemed to be reveling in the chaos she created. James put a hand on my shoulder, finally breaking through his own shock. "Enough," he said, his voice laced with fury. "Megan, this is insane. We're going to settle this right now. You're not going to disrupt our lives with these lies." But Megan just shrugged, her face impassive. "I'll let the court prove it. You'll see soon enough." As she turned to leave, I felt both my anger and fear collide. How could she do this to me, to us? How far was she willing to go? As the day ended and our guests filtered out, whispers and shocked glances trailing behind them, James and I were left with the wreckage Megan had created. He looked at me, his expression softened, but the confusion and hurt were still there. "Why would she say something like that, Anna?" he asked quietly. "Is this just some sick game to her?" I shook my head, tears stinging my eyes. "I don't know, James. She's always been difficult. But this, I never imagined she'd go this far. He pulled me close, holding me in his arms, and for the first time that day, I let the tears fall. The idea that Megan would actually file a paternity suit, try to claim that my own baby wasn't mine, was something I could hardly fathom. But I knew one thing: I was going to fight. This baby was mine, and no one, not even my sister, was going to take her from me. The next morning, I woke up to the ping of my phone. My stomach churned as I read the message from my lawyer, Rachel Clark, 42F. It was brief, but enough to make my blood run cold. "Anna, I need you to come in. Megan has officially filed a paternity suit." It was real. She was actually going through with it. I sat on the edge of the bed, unable to shake the shock. James stirred beside me, noticing my expression. "Is everything okay?" he asked, his voice thick with sleep. I handed him my phone, unable to say the words out loud. As he read the message, his face hardened. "This is unbelievable. She's actually doing it." I nodded, trying to keep myself together. "Rachel wants to meet this morning to discuss what we need to do." James held my hand, squeezing it gently. "Then let's fight this, Anna. This baby is ours. I won't let her get away with this." An hour later, we were in Rachel's office, the sterile surroundings doing little to calm my nerves. Rachel reviewed Megan's claims, her expression grim as she flipped through the documents. She took a deep breath before looking up at us. "Megan's suit is unusual, to say the least. She's filed a paternity suit to claim the child, alleging that she's the biological mother and that you're carrying her child as a surrogate without consent." James scoffed, but Rachel's expression remained serious. "Look, I know it sounds absurd, but it's clear she's trying to create enough confusion to cast doubt. Family court cases like these can be complicated, and Megan is banking on that complexity to make her claims appear credible." I could barely contain my frustration. "But Rachel, she's making things up. I've been pregnant for months. I have my medical records, my ultrasounds, everything. How could anyone believe this?" Rachel leaned forward, her gaze steady. "Medical records and evidence are on our side, but Megan has filed the claim as a civil suit. She's alleging that you're carrying her genetic child, meaning she's framing this as a case of surrogacy and deceit. This complicates things legally, because we'll need to prove the biological connection through court-ordered DNA testing." James shook his head, his face filled with disbelief. "This is madness. Hannah's own sister is using the legal system to ruin her life." Rachel nodded. "Family cases can get messy, and Megan knows that. She's banking on the emotional toll and the drawn-out process. But we'll fight this, step by step." Rachel suggested an immediate approach. She would request a DNA test once the baby was born to establish paternity and maternity, and file an injunction to prevent Megan from making any additional claims or contact until after the test was completed. In the meantime, we needed to prepare for the possibility that Megan would escalate. She may try to approach people who'll support her story, claim emotional distress, or even seek witnesses to back up her surrogacy theory. Rachel warned. "Be prepared for her to drag anyone she can into this: friends, extended family members, even acquaintances. She's going to make this as public as she can." My heart sank at the thought. The idea of Megan spinning this narrative, trying to paint me as the villain, was devastating. But there was no turning back now. As the days passed, Megan's tactics intensified. She started showing up at my doctor's appointments, sitting in the waiting room with a smug look, her arms crossed, watching me with a twisted satisfaction. When I tried to ignore her, she'd follow me out, making loud comments like, "I hope you're taking good care of my baby." People in the waiting room would turn and stare, and I felt humiliated and powerless. It didn't end there. Megan began reaching out to family members, planting seeds of doubt. I started getting messages from cousins and even old friends asking if everything was okay, telling me they'd heard rumors about the baby. Some people were clearly uncomfortable even asking, but they'd heard Megan's story and were confused, concerned, or outright disbelieving. One evening, my aunt called me, her tone hesitant. "Anna, I don't know how to say this, but Megan's been telling everyone you're carrying her child. That you stole her pregnancy." The absurdity of it all made me feel like I was in a nightmare. Aunt Joan, please listen. Megan is lying. She's making things up to hurt me. I have no idea why she's doing this, but none of it is true. She paused, her voice soft. I believe you, honey. I know you would never do something like that. But the family is talking. Megan's trying to convince people that you're carrying her baby, and some of them are starting to believe her. I was devastated, but I knew this was exactly what Megan wanted. She was planting doubt, creating drama, and trying to isolate me. James was furious, but we agreed to keep quiet about the case, even when friends and family questioned us. Rachel advised that we hold our ground, let the legal system work, and avoid engaging with Megan directly, no matter how hard she tried to provoke us. As the weeks passed, I grew more exhausted, both physically and emotionally. The pregnancy was taking its toll, and the stress of Megan's harassment only made things worse. The strain began to show on James as well. We'd wake up to messages from friends or even co-workers who'd heard Megan's claims, asking if everything was okay. Our lives felt like they were under siege. One morning, I arrived home to find an envelope waiting at the door. It was a formal notice. Megan was now filing for a temporary custody hearing to gain parental rights over the baby once she was born. I sat down, shaking as I read the document. Megan was escalating things even further, preparing to go after my child before she was even born. When I showed the papers to James, he was livid. She can't do this. She's not even the mother. This is our baby. Rachel arranged an emergency meeting, her expression grave. This is exactly what we feared. She's trying to gain public traction and sympathy by framing herself as a wronged mother. But this move might backfire for her. It's incredibly hard to gain custody of an unborn child, especially with the lack of evidence on her part. It's more intimidation than a legitimate claim. But why? I whispered, the hurt and confusion welling up inside me. Why would she go to such lengths? Rachel looked at me thoughtfully. Sometimes, when people feel they're losing control or feeling sidelined, they act out. Megan might be jealous or angry about something beyond this, but at the end of the day, it's about controlling you. She sees the baby as a way to hurt you, to hold power over you. It was devastating to hear, but it rang true. Megan had always been competitive, always seeking attention. But I never imagined she'd do something like this, something so cruel, so damaging. Rachel's plan was to move forward with the injunction, file an immediate counter-motion to dismiss her custody claim, and then request a psychological evaluation for Megan. Her behavior is extreme, and a court-ordered evaluation could reveal if there's something deeper at play, she explained. I agreed, though the idea of subjecting my sister to such scrutiny felt surreal. But she'd left me no choice. She was intent on ruining my life, on turning my pregnancy, the happiest time of my life, into a nightmare. James wrapped his arms around me as we left Rachel's office, his voice low and determined. We're going to get through this, Anna. We're going to prove she's lying, and then she'll never be able to hurt us again. As we drove home, I looked down at my growing belly, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. Megan might have poisoned the minds of friends and family, but I wasn't going to let her take my child. This baby was mine, and I would fight with everything I had to protect her from Megan's lies. Weeks passed, and Megan's onslaught only intensified. The injunction Rachel filed against Megan helped to keep her at bay physically, but the psychological toll was wearing on me. Megan found new ways to try and undermine my sanity from a distance, even convincing a few family members to question my stability. She'd managed to twist reality so expertly that, incredibly, some people actually began to wonder if there was any truth to her claims. Every few days, I'd hear about her latest ploy. Megan had apparently started a support group online, claiming she was a mother fighting for her child. Posts circulated about her surrogate sister, whom she painted as a betrayer who had stolen her baby. Megan's lies were designed to provoke the deepest kind of outrage, and unfortunately, some strangers on the internet bought into her narrative. Anonymous comments and messages started filling my inbox, strangers hurling hateful words and demanding answers. But the worst part came one evening when James and I arrived home to find a court summons taped to our door. Megan had managed to file an emergency request for a psychological evaluation on me. She was now claiming that I was mentally unstable, saying that I was a danger to the baby. I stared at the summons in disbelief, barely able to process the levels of manipulation she was stooping to. James, his face set in grim determination, called Rachel immediately. She came over that evening, briefing us on the options and explaining the court's process. "We'll respond to this request," Rachel said, her tone firm. "Her claims are baseless, but I want you to understand that this is Megan trying to undermine you, Anna, to test your limits and see if you'll crack. But if we go through this evaluation, we can use it to our advantage. Once we prove you're mentally sound, it will only strengthen our case against her." It was the last thing I wanted to do, but Rachel was right. Megan had dragged me into a twisted game, and if I wanted to prove her wrong, I had to play along for now. The psychological evaluation was scheduled a few days later. I spent hours in a small office with a therapist, going over every detail of my life that Megan had warped into her story. I explained the truth, describing the real relationship between Megan and me and detailing her harassment over the past months. The therapist was professional and kind, but the questions were exhausting, draining me emotionally. But I stayed focused, reminding myself that every minute I spent here was another step toward proving Megan's lies wrong. A week later, the results came in. My evaluation was clear, confirming my mental stability and fitness as a mother. Rachel immediately filed a motion to have Megan's custody claims dismissed based on the results, adding the evaluation as evidence. It felt like a victory, even though I knew the battle wasn't over yet. Megan, predictably, didn't back down. A few days after the motion was filed, we received another round of harassment. Megan began contacting reporters, trying to sell her story of a sisterly betrayal. The story didn't gain much traction, but the few gossip columns that picked it up added more stress to an already unbearable situation. Friends and family called, texting me in shock, some expressing sympathy while others hinted at disbelief, asking me if there was any truth to what Megan was claiming. The betrayal from people I'd thought I could count on hurt more than I'd ever expected. Even my own mother, who had always favored Megan a little more than me, called me with concern. "Anna, honey, are you sure there's nothing to what Megan's saying?" she asked hesitantly. "She's so convincing and she's your sister." My heart broke as I realized even my own mother was swayed by Megan's manipulation. "Mom, I'm telling you the truth. Megan's lying. She's trying to ruin my life, and she doesn't care what it costs." I just don't understand why she'd go this far," she whispered, her voice strained. "This is all so messy." I felt my anger flare, but I held back. "I can't control what Megan does, Mom. But I know one thing, this baby is mine, and nothing she does will ever change that." After I hung up, I felt a sense of loneliness settle in, like a heavy blanket draped over me. Even my own family was starting to question me. Megan's relentless campaign was turning everything I knew upside down, leaving me isolated in my own life. Rachel's next steps were to counteract Megan's narrative. "We need to show the court how Megan's false claims and harassment are affecting you, Anna," she said during one of our meetings. "Every bit of evidence we have, the online posts, the attempts to ruin your reputation, can be used to demonstrate her intent to harm you and this child." But as we prepared our counters, Megan escalated again. This time, she filed an emergency court order requesting that she be allowed in the delivery room to witness the birth of her child. The absurdity was almost laughable, but Rachel's expression remained serious as she explained the implications. "Megan's goal is to intrude as much as possible, to rattle you into making a mistake she can use against you. But legally, she has no grounds to request access, and I'll file for a restraining order to ensure she can't come within 100 feet of the delivery room." Rachel's response reassured me, but the mere thought of Megan invading the most private moment of my life shook me. I'd imagined that moment as one filled with joy and peace, with James by my side, welcoming our baby into the world. Now, thanks to Megan, it had become another battlefield, one that required legal protection just to keep her away. But the court ultimately ruled in our favor, granting the restraining order and denying Megan's request. I felt a surge of relief, a small victory in a sea of chaos. Rachel reassured me that the mounting legal actions against Megan, the custody battle, the restraining order, and the dismissed paternity suit were all building our case, showing her as a malicious and unstable influence. But I knew better than to think this was over. Then came a break in our favor. Rachel called me one morning with a note of excitement in her voice. "Anna, I don't want to get your hopes up prematurely, but I just received word that Megan's case might be reaching its breaking point. A court official reviewed the recent filings and found Megan's actions so extreme that they're questioning her mental fitness to pursue this case." I felt a spark of hope, but I tempered it with caution. "What does that mean, exactly?" Rachel's voice was optimistic. "It means that if they deem Megan's actions as unfit or erratic, her case could be dismissed permanently, and the court could issue a no-contact order. But we still have to wait for an official ruling. This could go either way." Days passed as we waited for the final decision. James and I held onto each other tightly, trying to find joy in our preparations for the baby despite the anxiety. Friends rallied around us, helping me feel more grounded and reminding me that we weren't alone in this fight. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Rachel called. I held my breath as I answered, James sitting beside me, his hand firmly in mine. "Anna," Rachel began, her voice filled with a quiet victory. "The court has decided to dismiss Megan's case. Her behavior was deemed as erratic and unsubstantiated, and they've granted us a full, indefinite restraining order. She won't be able to contact you or come near the baby, now or ever." A wave of relief washed over me, and I felt the tears spill down my cheeks. After months of battling Megan's lies, the nightmare was finally over. James wrapped his arms around me, holding me close as we absorbed the news. Megan's campaign had failed, and she would no longer have any legal claim to my child or our lives. That evening, as we sat together, feeling the quiet and peace for the first time in months, I placed a hand on my belly and smiled. Our baby girl was safe, free from Megan's clutches. I knew there would still be whispers, lingering questions from those who had heard her lies, but I didn't care. We had won. I was ready to start a new chapter, a life filled with love, trust, and peace. With the court ruling firmly in our favor and the restraining order in place, James and I finally had a chance to breathe. The constant anxiety that had hung over us for months started to lift, and life settled into a tentative calm. I could finally focus on the last few weeks of my pregnancy without Megan's twisted threats looming over me. But the relief was bittersweet. Megan's actions had left scars, and they'd cut deep, changing my relationships with those I thought I could count on. The damage she'd done to my reputation and my friendships wasn't something that could be erased with a court order. The few family members who had believed her lies were distant, almost embarrassed to face me. The ones who had stuck by me tried to fill the void, but even they didn't know how to handle what we'd been through. One afternoon, while cleaning out the nursery, I found an old photo album tucked away at the back of the closet. I sat down and flipped through it, my fingers tracing the familiar images. Pictures of me and Megan as kids, laughing, playing dress-up, celebrating birthdays together. She had been my first friend, my confidant. The bitterness of her betrayal washed over me, and I found myself wondering, how did we get here? James walked in, noticing the album and sitting beside me. He looked over the pictures, his expression softening. "You know," he said quietly, "I can't imagine how hard this has been for you, losing her this way." A tear slipped down my cheek as I closed the album. "It's not just that I lost her," I whispered. "It's that I never really knew her. I thought we were close, but she could do this to me. It's like she was a stranger all along." James wrapped an arm around me, pulling me close. "She may have tried to ruin our lives, but she didn't win. We're still here, and we're stronger for it." I nodded, letting myself take comfort in his words. We were stronger. We'd made it through Megan's storm, and the life we were about to welcome was filled with new possibilities, free from her interference. As the days passed, word spread that Megan's case had been dismissed, and the court's ruling had silenced any lingering doubts about her story. Slowly, friends who had distanced themselves began to reach out, apologizing for their silence, explaining that they hadn't known what to believe in the face of such dramatic accusations. My mother was one of the first to call, her voice trembling with emotion. "Anna, I don't know if you'll ever forgive me, but I want you to know I am so sorry. I should have stood by you. I was wrong to ever doubt you." Hearing her remorse was a balm, but the hurt was still raw. "Mom, I needed you. More than anyone, I needed you to believe me." "And you didn't," I replied, unable to keep the pain from my voice. She was silent for a long moment before she whispered, "I know, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. I let Megan manipulate me, and I can never take that back. But if there's any way I can be here for you, for my granddaughter, please just say the word." I took a deep breath, letting the weight of her apology settle over me. "I want you to be part of her life, Mom. But things have to be different. Trust has to be earned back." She agreed, promising to be there for us, to make amends however she could. It wasn't complete forgiveness, but it was a start. Even a few friends who had distanced themselves began to reach out, their texts and messages filled with apologies and offers to make amends. It was a slow, tentative reconnection, and I realized that I had to give myself permission to let some people back in, even if it was guardedly. Megan had almost succeeded in isolating me, but I wasn't going to let her control who I could rely on. As we prepared for the baby's arrival, James and I attended a small family gathering. I knew it would be uncomfortable seeing extended family who had been swayed by Megan's lies, but I felt ready to face them. At first, people greeted us cautiously, as if unsure how to approach. But as the evening went on, a few came over to express their relief that Megan's claims had been debunked. "I'm so sorry, Anna," my cousin Emily, 28F, said, giving me a tight hug. "I should have known better than to believe her. I know she's always been dramatic, but I didn't think she was capable of something like this." I hugged her back, grateful for her honesty. "Thank you, Emily. I understand. This whole thing has been unreal for all of us." The gathering felt like a new beginning, a chance to show everyone that we'd come through Megan's storm stronger. James stayed by my side, his presence grounding me as we slowly started to repair the frayed connections Megan had tried to sever. I knew that not every relationship would be the same, but I realized that I didn't need everyone to believe in me. I had my family, my real family, and that was enough. As my due date approached, the overwhelming stress of the last few months began to subside, replaced by a sense of excitement and peace. I spent the days nesting, preparing the nursery, and imagining the life we'd build for our daughter. One evening, as I sat by the crib we'd assembled together, I felt the first gentle kicks of labor starting. James rushed to my side, his face filled with a mixture of excitement and nervousness, and together we headed to the hospital, ready to meet our baby girl. The delivery room was calm, filled with the soft glow of dimmed lights and the steady encouragement of the nurses. It was exactly what I'd wanted, a moment of peace to bring our daughter into the world. As I held her for the first time, all the fear and pain Megan had caused faded away, replaced by an overwhelming sense of love and purpose. James held our daughter gently, tears in his eyes as he looked at her. "She's perfect, Anna. This is everything we've been fighting for." I nodded, feeling an overwhelming sense of gratitude. "She's ours, James, and she's safe." In the days following her birth, friends and family poured in with well wishes, sending gifts and letters of congratulations. Megan's influence was a distant memory, and with our baby in my arms, I realized I had everything I needed. One afternoon, while holding our daughter, I received a message from Rachel. She congratulated me on the baby and let me know that the courts had officially sealed the restraining order as indefinite, meaning Megan would have no legal standing to challenge us again. The finality of it felt like a gift, a promise that Megan would never disrupt our lives again. Months passed, and life took on a beautiful, peaceful rhythm. Friends and family visited, laughing and sharing stories, filling our home with warmth and joy. Our daughter grew stronger and happier every day, surrounded by love and support from people who had shown their loyalty and kindness through the hardest of times. As I held her one quiet evening, watching her sleep, I whispered a silent promise. "You'll always be safe, little one. No one will ever harm you." In that moment, I felt an unbreakable strength in myself, a strength forged through every trial, every tear, every fight Megan had tried to bring upon us. She had tried to divide us, to sow chaos in our lives, but we had come through it together, and nothing could break us now. Our family was whole, and our lives were filled with love. Megan's darkness had been no match for the light we had built, and as I looked down at my daughter, I knew that we had created something beautiful, something indestructible. In the quiet weeks following our daughter's arrival, James and I began settling into the new rhythm of parenthood. Each day felt like a gift, a small victory over the storm Megan had tried to unleash on us. Every smile, every yawn, every tiny milestone our daughter reached was a reminder of the peace we'd fought so hard to protect. Our home became a sanctuary of laughter and love, filled with friends and family who had stood by us. My mother visited often, her initial guilt replaced by a quiet, steady commitment to be there for us. She would rock our daughter to sleep or tell her stories, apologizing in soft moments, her regret clear in her eyes. One afternoon, as she held my daughter and watched her fall asleep, my mother turned to me. "Thank you for letting me be a part of this," she said, her voice trembling. "I know I failed you when you needed me the most, but seeing you and James so strong together, I've never been more proud of you." Her words were an unexpected balm, and for the first time, I felt a sense of healing. "I appreciate you being here now," I said, reaching out to hold her hand. "It's a new beginning for all of us." My days were filled with quiet moments like these. As my daughter grew, so did my gratitude for the life we built. Even James seemed transformed by the peace that had returned to our lives, his joy evident in the way he doted on our daughter. Each morning, he'd take her on little walks around the house, pointing out the trees in the backyard, the pictures on the wall, even showing her the books he'd loved as a child. Watching them together filled me with a happiness I hadn't known was possible. Months later, on a warm spring day, we decided to host a small gathering to introduce our daughter to our closest family and friends. It was a symbolic event for us, a way to celebrate not just her birth, but the resilience that had carried us through Megan's assault on our family. Our friends brought flowers, laughing and filling our home with a joyful energy that felt almost surreal after everything we'd been through. My aunt, who had doubted me during the worst of Megan's lies, approached me with a soft smile. "I know there's no way to erase the past," she began, her voice full of regret. "But I want you to know I see how strong you are, Anna. You and James, you've built something beautiful together. I wish I'd believed in you sooner." I felt the familiar ache of disappointment, but met her eyes with forgiveness. "We've moved forward," I replied, giving her a small smile, "and I hope we all can." Rebuilding trust was a process, but the gathering brought with it a sense of peace. People who had been uncertain or distant before now saw the life James and I had created, a life that Megan could never touch. There was a quiet acceptance in the air, a mutual understanding that we had survived something together and emerged stronger. Later that night, after everyone had left and the house was finally quiet, James and I sat together, our daughter cradled between us. We were exhausted, but the kind of exhaustion that comes from fulfillment and peace rather than turmoil. He looked at me, his eyes filled with love and pride. "We made it, Anna. All of it, Megan, the lies, the court battles, it's behind us. And this little one, she's safe, she's ours." I held his hand, letting the weight of his words settle over me. "We did make it," I said softly, leaning into him. "And it's only going to get better from here." We sat in silence for a while, listening to the quiet hum of the house. I thought about all the ways Megan had tried to tear us apart, how her lies had seeped into every corner of our lives. But she had failed. Her absence, the restraining order, the finality of it all felt like a closed door, one I'd never have to open again. With Megan out of our lives indefinitely, I felt a sense of freedom. She had been a force of chaos, but she no longer had a hold over us. We were finally free to build our lives, to raise our daughter in a home filled with love and strength. In the weeks that followed, James and I made plans for the future, talking about everything from vacations we'd take as a family to the little traditions we wanted to start with our daughter. Life was no longer about survival. It was about creating moments of joy, building memories, and embracing the future we'd fought so hard to protect. One evening, as I tucked my daughter into her crib, I felt a wave of gratitude wash over me. I had my family, my strength, and my peace. The life we had was one Megan could never take from us. I whispered softly, "You're safe, my love, and you always will be." As I closed her door and walked back to James, I knew that our journey was only beginning. We had come through the storm and found each other on the other side, stronger and more deeply connected than ever before. We had a future filled with promise, and together we were unstoppable.